Hey everybody. I'm gonna start this off saying I'm a little bit disappointed. I wanted to do another video where I filmed myself doing something, and I had lots of ideas that were interesting for me about what to do. And I was just thinking different things. I was thinking about transliterating some 90s R&B songs into Elizabethan English. I was thinking about explaining how cassette tape adapters work, which is pretty neat. I was thinking about talking about the Nazis' plan to put a magnifying glass or gigantic solar reflector in space to use sunlight concentrated as a weapon. But those are all things I would like to do in front of my camera. And during the, panic due to the global pandemic, I moved out of my dorm room and lost my charger at some point in the process. So my camera's dead and I can't use it. And I don't really want to use my laptop camera because the quality's not the best. But I have a microphone, and I have paint, and I have this balloon, which is actually probably causing a lot of noise, so I shouldn't be playing with it. But oh well. Anyways. But I would like to do a video about something. So, I had an idea today, and it's a stupid idea, but something you might find interesting. Now, if you are familiar with Faraday's law of induction, then you know that Faraday's law of induction... I can't believe I don't know how to use MSPaint. There we go. Okay, we're gonna call this thing right here a magnet, this red part and black part. Now, a magnet creates a magnetic field. Yeah, that works. MSPaint science, everybody. Now, Faraday's law states that that a changing magnetic field through a loop of wire induces an electrical current. So, green will be our wire color. Okay, so you have a wire coming in. You have coils. Now, this magnet, as you move it in and out, as you move it towards and away from this coil of wire, the magnetic field's obviously going to change. It's going to get stronger and weaker as you move it forwards and backwards. And Faraday's law states that what that will do is it will induce a current and will cause electricity to come up in the wire. Now, that's interesting in its own right, but it's a side effect of something a little bit nuts. But there is something a little bit bigger and a little bit more interesting, I think. Oops. Okay, you know what? We're just gonna... There we go. Just gonna cover that all up. Anyways. Now, let's go back to that wire. Not the wire, the magnet. Local idiot struggles with MSPaint. News at 11. Now, something you might not know about magnets is that you don't even need a wire for interesting things to happen. Ah, nuts. Okay. Let's say you have a magnet. Positive end, negative end. Now, what will happen if you spin it? I forgot I was on rectangles. Oh, man, the plan is falling apart at the seams. Okay. Now, what would happen if you were to spin it? Well, obviously, the magnetic field would change, as it would be as the direction it's pointing is changing, and so the strength of the magnetic field in areas around the magnet would change as well, because sometimes, let's say you have a certain point. Let's make it blue. Okay, that was on me. Boop. Now, Sometimes when the magnet's oriented like this, then the magnetic field will be sort of horizontal like this. This is a bad example, but I wish I had like an actual bar magnet in the camera so I could demonstrate this a little bit better. But like right now, the magnetic field would be kind of oriented this way. It'd be passing through the blue dot in that particular way, and it'd be a certain distance from the magnet, so it would have a certain amount of magnetic field there. As you get closer, the magnetic field increases. As you get farther away, the magnetic field decreases. Now, what would happen if, like, the magnet spun? So now, like, the black rectangle-y part, we'll call it's one of the poles, was like, okay, the red rectangle-y part, I don't care, was like this. Well, then the field lines, dang it, I'm making so many mistakes. You can tell I don't rehearse for these at all. Then the field lines would be like this. And the magnetic field would have a different direction at the blue point and would have a different strength. Now, that's something you probably could have already guessed. If you spin a magnet, then the magnetic field around it at places is going to change. What does that mean for whatever I'm talking about? Okay, now this is where things get a little bit bonkers. Not physically, I mean, like, I do bonkers things. Please let me erase. Please. Go. Nice. I had an idea earlier. Now, if you know me, and even if you don't know me, you can probably guess, but I'm a fan of science and science fiction. I am a physics major, so sciencey things, anything about the future is interesting to me. And I had an idea. Now, the golden record, if you're familiar with it, was a record coated in gold that I believe was included on the Voyager 1 spacecraft. I don't quite remember. But the golden record and its associated plaque essentially served as an introduction to humanity and Earth. It had sounds from Earth, different languages, different music, pictures of what humans looked like, and the location of Earth relative to various other objects. Why would it have something like that? The idea was, if an alien or an extraterrestrial intelligence found Voyager 1 and recovered it and recovered, like, the plaque, they'd be able to make contact with us. And that is just one example of many attempts at, like, finding or contacting extraterrestrial intelligence. And that's just, like, I find things like that fascinating. I find, like, the mission of SETI fascinating. I find all the little things that we've done to see if there's any other intelligent life out there fascinating, like the Arecibo message, and the things we picked up, like the mysterious bloop, I think it was called, or like things that we observed that might seem to be megastructures. And there's been different proposals about how we might go about finding extraterrestrial intelligence, and or how we might go about showing that we exist ourselves. And earlier this morning, I came up with my own idea, or it was an idea that occurred to me. Somebody probably has come up with it first. But enough with the preamble. Let's talk about summoning the Mothership through magnets. No? Okay. Okay. So we're going to draw we are going to draw a magnet. That's red. Okay. And now this one's black. So my proposal is essentially a megastructure. It's something on, I don't know, planetary scale, probably larger. I'm not sure. But the idea is essentially something like this. We would need to take a massive, truly massive amount of ferrite material like iron and such and magnetize it and compose it into a massive cylinder. Massive cylinder, massive bar. Not terribly important. Just as long as it's like a long shape that can be spun around a central axis. Now, as you can imagine, this would have a North Pole and a South Pole, and there'd be a massive magnetic field from the North Pole to the South Pole, coming off a magnet the size of a planet, and probably several times stronger than the Earth's magnetic field, or, if we can manage it, any natural magnetic field. And then, my proposal is using something like an Orion drive, which would probably use nuclear explosions or some other source of explosive energy, to rotate the bar quickly. Now, what would that do? As a magnet rotates, I mentioned this earlier, the magnetic field changes. And when a magnetic field changes, not only can it induce current in a coil of wire, but it can emit electromagnetic waves. I am not joking. If you go to your fridge, take off a magnet, and then just wave it around in the air like a lunatic, it will generate extremely like small amplitude waves, extremely low power, long wavelength waves, but they will generate waves. Now, in order to spin like a normal magnet fast enough to generate like a wave that like people can observe relatively easily, like a radio wave, you'd have to spin it somewhere on the order of like millions, if not billions, of revolutions a second. The magnet would not be strong enough to handle the acceleration at the edges. It would literally shatter. It would fling itself apart like a CD drive that went too fast. I've actually seen a video of that happening once. It's kind of scary. And in case I didn't mention that earlier, that's why I was talking about magnetic fields, since bar magnets spinning and changing. But that's not important right now. But it's true, if you swing a magnet, if you just like move a magnet and you change a magnetic field, you will get waves. So, what this would do, a magnet the size of a planet, spinning at high speeds, would constantly generate electromagnetic waves. And as it rotates, it would just generate waves in a massive arc, just all over, and just like a wide circle around itself. And what that would do, I call it an MRB, massive radio beacon. And essentially what that giant magnet would hopefully do is it would create magnetic fields. Well, it would have magnetic fields, but the magnetic fields would create electromagnetic waves, like radio waves or infrared waves or possibly light waves, that would vary periodically and be noticeable to other intelligences. Something that's interesting to me about like the search for extraterrestrial life on Earth is that we do a lot of listening. SETI mainly observes things. They're astronomers. They look for possible transmissions or signs of intelligence out there in the world. It's very much a sort of like passive sonar in a submarine where you're listening to see if anyone else is out there. Essentially what this would be like the Voyager 1 on a ludicrously massive scale. It would be active sonar. Well, not active sonar. We wouldn't be able to find somebody else through this, but they would be able to find us by homing in on this massive radio beacon that's just constantly generating radio waves. Now, there are a lot of problems. I'd like to talk about the problems for a bit because, well, frankly, I'm bored, and frankly, also, I think it's interesting to talk about. But yeah, that's the basic idea so far. Massive planetary, possibly star scale magnetic bar, rotating fast enough that it constantly generates waves that other beings could pick up on theoretically. Now, like I mentioned earlier, a magnet, if you spin it, well, anything if you spin it fast enough. If you spin anything fast enough, it will fly apart. Just the acceleration and the forces that it's undergoing will be too strong, and it would just break. So, and I'm not sure how exactly, like, that's the whole problem with this idea in general. I'm an amateur. I don't understand the electrodynamics of this enough to tell you what frequency the waves would be, or how big the bar would have to be, or how big its field would have to be, how strong its magnetic field, I should say, or what the waves would be like. And I couldn't really tell you, like, if, even so, like, if it would be theoretically constructible, but this is just me spitballing here. So that'd be one possible problem. In order to get like a reasonably observable wave, you might have to spin so fast that no material could conceivably hold up. It would just always shatter apart before you could. Obviously, another problem is the scale. Just the amount of material this would require puts something like a Dyson sphere. Just makes it look positively quaint in comparison. For those of you who don't know, I'll just go on a bit of a tangent. Okay. Like, let's say this is a star. Just a nice little star. Now, essentially what a Dyson sphere is, or let's start with a Dyson ring. A Dyson ring would be a ring of, like, solar panels and energy collectors around a star so that it captures energy. Captures the energy of the star, captures the light, captures heat, captures radiation, everything. And a Dyson sphere is an extension of that. It is a three-dimensional superstructure that would theoretically capture all of the energy output of a star. It's a concept originally devised by Freeman Dyson, who unfortunately just died the other day. That's a shame. But it's one of the most notable megastructures. And frankly, just the amount of material like the MRB would require would probably make a lot of Dyson spheres look just kind of adorable in comparison, because this is just a gigantic lump of iron floating in space. And that's not an easy thing to get a handle of. Obviously, building it would be a challenge, because you couldn't build it inside the gravity well of any planet. You'd have to build it well outside the gravity well of a planet, because you would not want. How would you even lift something that large out of like Earth's gravity? You wouldn't be able to. You wouldn't have enough engines. You could throw every nuke in the world at it, and you might not get it all the way there. But that's another problem. So yeah, that's 2 problems so far. A, not even sure I could build it. Well, that's 3. Not even sure you could really build it. Just if there would ever be a material that could stand up. Or B, just even if you could, the amount of material would be ludicrous. C, building it would be a challenge because you have to build it well away from anything. Anything at all. Anything in space. It's just a nightmare, because the gravity would be so massive. And not only that, but magnetic waves and just like the electromagnetic waves, it would just experience constant radio noise, because that's its purpose. It's a non-tune, just blaring radio siren in all directions. It would just screw up communications for God only knows how far around itself. So yeah, it's an idea with a lot of problems, just sort of like a Dyson sphere has practicality problems too. Not to the same degree, but it is something I came up with, and I think it's interesting, the MRB. And there's lots of interesting ways that I thought if you could work with it. Like one idea I had was, well, you want to make sure that an MRB is distinguishable from a star or a planet. You want to make sure that they don't just think it's a natural phenomenon, because a sign is worthless if someone can't recognize that it's a sign. So one idea I had, well, I had two ideas. One was a multi-star system. Like Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system to us. Okay, yeah, you know what? Brown star. It's going to be a brown star. Stars can be brown. They can be yellow. They can be red. This one's going to be yellow. But Alpha Centauri is in fact a 3-star system. And something I thought of that you might be able to do is... Nuts. I don't want that to be a circle. Okay. Let's say this is a massive radio beacon. Just a planet-sized magnet that's spinning on an axis and is just radiating radio signals everywhere for aliens to pick up. I think something you could do, maybe, theoretically, is to put it in... frustration. Can you tell I do these at 11 o'clock at night when my mind isn't very clear? But the idea I had was, essentially what you could do is you could orbit the MRB around... This is a horrible example. This is not accurate at all, I don't think. But you could orbit the MRB around a multi-star or even a multi-planet system. And the result of that would be, even if the MRB is emitting waves similar to that of other planets or other stars, then you might still be able to detect that there's something unnatural about it because it'd be behaving extremely erratically. You could theoretically set up an orbit where it would beam out in certain areas a certain frequency, like a certain message, I would say. Like at regular intervals, it beams in a certain direction. Maybe. Again, my mind isn't very clear. But ideally, again, as the MRB rotates, it would also orbit around different planetary bodies or different stellar bodies. And that, in result, would create an erratic movement of the magnetic field that other intelligences may pick up on as not necessarily natural. They may say, okay, this is clearly something that's emitting a lot of radiation, but it's not a planet, it's not a star, what is it? And following up on it's not a planet, it's not a star, there came my saccharine idea, which I actually had coming out of the shower earlier today. And that would be putting the MRB in the middle of nowhere. What does that mean? Well, I keep forgetting. Okay. Now, let's say this yellow circle is the sun. Let's say this... I keep forgetting. Okay. This green circle is Alpha Centauri. It's the nearest star system. Now, the distance between the two, 4.3 light years. And yes, I know that off the top of my head. The point I want to make here is that space is really, really big. Most of space is empty space. So, what does that mean? What can you do with that? Well, here's something I propose. Stars form over billions of years. It is a very long process to birth a star. Comparatively, a MBR, I think, could be built once we have the appropriate materials and technology, could be built on the scale of a few millennia? I'm not sure. But the idea is you could create an MBR somewhere in empty space, like the space between Earth, the Sun, and Alpha Centauri, and you could set it spinning. And what that would do would be, it would look like it would look like a new star at first, at least like with regards to electromagnetic radiation coming off it. It would look like a new star or a new quasar. Quasar? I think it's a quasar. I'm not sure. But basically, the radiation would look like lots of other objects in space, but it would be born so much faster. If any extraterrestrial intelligence was observing that area of the sky for some time, they would see something be born very rapidly on a cosmic scale. Because again, stars form on the order of billions of years. This would not take that long. It would take a while, certainly, but it would not take billions of years to put something together like this. So when they see the waves coming off this, and when they see it suddenly come up, like with all these waves, compared to how long it takes stars to form, they'd be able to at least maybe not recognize it's a sign, but recognize it is a new phenomenon which they have not previously observed. And that'd be another way to differentiate it from other stellar objects. One idea I had was, as I mentioned, plotting it in erratic orbits so that way it doesn't appear to move like anything else. This would just be relying on the fact it doesn't take long to build, at least on the universal scale, and using that to signal something new is going on. Now, I'm not 100% sure that would work. You might just interpret it as a star going nova or something, but because the magnet would ideally only emit certain frequencies of waves, I think that's how it would work anyways. Because it would only emit a comparatively narrow band of waves compared to a star going nova or just a star just even radiating normally, that too might be enough to catch interest and just reveal this to be something else. But yeah, that was an idea I had. Really just kind of a weird concept, but I like to think about things like that, like solutions to different problems, like how might we contact extraterrestrial life, or how might we show that we exist to one. And that's my proposal in MBR. Unrelated, just side note, something I thought was just something I thought of. My original idea was just like take a planet and then just like move as much magnetic material and magnetic core material outside it as you can. And then just like as the planet rotated, just the magnetic core would rotate and it would just create waves that way. But I don't know, that just seems less fun. That just seems less fun than just making a gigantic bar magnet out in the middle of space and then spinning it around so aliens can find it. But yeah, that's my proposal. I probably am borderline incoherent now. I am babbling like a madman. So I'm going to wish you all good night.